It's time to bring in our all-star panel. Elizabeth Mitchell joins us for the first time. She is the White House correspondent for the Daily Signal. Our friends Rob Bluey, everybody over there. Elizabeth is excited to join us for our first time. Back in the veteran seat, Sara Gonzales, the host of Sara Gonzales Unfiltered, down there at the Blaze. And my co-host in the morning, the great Dan Turrentine. Guys, good to see you all. I'm so excited to get ready for the weekend. I hope you are too.
Yes,
for having us.
So.
Good.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Dan, I want to start with you because we talked about this in the morning meeting, and I was excited to talk about it well before we even brought it up. President Biden did this interview on the BBC, which I thought was an odd choice to begin with. And then today he's on The View with his wife, Jill Biden. Why?
I think a lot of Democrats are asking the same question, Sean. I think, look, it's likely that what he wants to do is try to rehabilitate his image. I don't think any president left office in worse standing in the last 50 years than Joe Biden. I mean, for all intents and purposes, Trump was president from November until being sworn in on January 20th. I think the problem is when you see Biden and you hear him, forget what it is he's saying. He looks old. He reminds you of all the drama that the party went through. And he still doesn't have good answers for what is coming. Why did you decide to run? Why did you then drop out? The problems at the border, the problems on the economy. And what he does is he just kind of wants to dig in, pound the table and say, convince you that you were wrong. The economy was really good. He had an immigration plan. He was a spry man and things were so good that he just decided to hand it off to a candidate who was in great shape. So he doesn't help himself, I think. And he certainly doesn't help the party.
So Elizabeth Mitchell, here's what I don't get to Dan's point. If you are scandal plagued, like you left office because you stole money or got convicted of something or something bad, I get the rehab part of why you would want to do a bunch of things and say, I'm a good person. I'm building houses. I'm giving back to the poor. I run a soup kitchen, right? You want to rehabilitate your image. Okay, I got it. But part of Biden's image is that he was old and frail. Right. And he's older and frailer now, as evidenced in that BBC interview. And I agree with Dan to some extent. Like, I think he's trying to rehab the image, but it's like you're actually reinforcing all of the bad qualities that people had concerns with when you remind them, hey, here I am. I'm still old. I'm older. I'm frailer. I'm kind of making excuses. I don't see how this is helpful to him and why no one around him says, hey, why don't we just hang out on the Rehoboth boardwalk and look at the seagulls?
Bringing his wife Jill on this interview definitely doesn't help with the statements that maybe she was the real president after all. Not too helpful to bring her along for that first interview. But another thing to note here is that The View has had 60 in the first 3 months of 2025. It had 63 far left guests and 0 conservative guests. The hosts have made numerous anti-conservative statements calling Christians mentally ill, all these different kinds of names, saying that they're comparable to the Taliban. Several years ago, that was said. And so it's not too surprising that this appearance here with Jill and Joe Biden, that they decided to go on a show like The View.
Sara Gonzales, Mark Halperin this morning on the morning meeting posited that maybe it's that they need the money, that the grift is over, and they need to go out there and do appearances to gin up support because there's no more gravy train for Biden Inc. anymore to grab onto, right? And I actually hadn't spent a ton of time thinking about that until Mark posited this. And I thought to myself, okay, I get it. But it goes back to the idea that I said to Elizabeth, which is, who's going to pay you? Like, if people look at you and they see you, I could see maybe doing private meetings. But if people are watching you and saying, why would I pay this guy to give me advice or give a speech if he's having trouble getting through a basic interview?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with Mark Halperin's assessment. I think that, where's a good Burisma when you need him, right? Where's a foreign company to come shell out some dough to my crackhead son and so that he can funnel me through shell companies several millions of dollars. And so I do think that is part of their equation, but obviously it's not well thought out. What I also will say is that I do think that when it comes to Joe and Jill Biden, They are so delusional about what actually took place for the 4 years prior to the Trump administration going in. You heard, well, at least you saw Joe Biden's lips say to Barack Obama, whoever's funeral they were at, I forget whose funeral they were at, but they were at a funeral, and Joe said to Barack, I could have won. And so he still has it in his head. He and Jill still have it in their heads that he could have won if they would not have ousted him. Remember, this was a coup. This wasn't Joe Biden being like, all right, I'll give you my keys. I can't drive anymore. And I'm turning it over to Kamala. He never endorsed Kamala Harris until there was a social media post on X from his account. Now, who posted that? We don't know, but it certainly doesn't seem like it was Joe Biden. And so for me, I think that they actually view these interviews as somewhat of a victory lap. You saw Joe Biden at the end of the campaign season. He was putting on the MAGA hat as a joke. Jill wore power red on election day. I mean, there were all sorts of signs that they wanted to just rub it in Kamala's face that she didn't stand a chance and that it should have been him the whole time. So I have to wonder how much of this also is like in their delusional minds, some sort of a victory lap, reminding people, I could have won.
But Dan, if that's true, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's, who do you blame does the Democratic Party, like I still think, and this came up in that BBC interview to some extent, it's like, it's your fault, Joe Biden. You didn't get out early enough. You said you were going to be a transition and a bridge, and you held on too long. And I mean, like, I, as an outsider, kind of think that the blame is still more on Biden than it is on Kamala for losing, because Biden, quote, didn't get out early enough.
Yeah, I look, absolutely. I think 90% of the party is going to go to their grave that if he had gotten out, look, if nothing else, we might have still gotten Harris, but there would have been a competition in the primary. I mean, Harris was a bad candidate in 19 and didn't even make it to Iowa, right? And the same things that plagued her in 24 plagued her then, kind of the caution, the taking no stances on anything, kind of playing not to lose. And I think Biden, you know, as I said before, he still doesn't have a good answer. And I think Elizabeth is right. Like, he still thinks he would have won. His team does. I forget who it was who went to the Harvard Institute of Politics right after the election. And he was still like, oh, you know, we were pushed out, but we would have won. Like, the polling wasn't that bad. You know, we had a plan to come back. And you just think you're delusional. Like, he just has no self-awareness about kind of what the position he put the party in and the position that we are still in today, largely because of him.
Yeah. Elizabeth, I want to shift gears. Big news last night that the president nominated Casey Means to be the next Surgeon General. Now, here's why that matters on several fronts. Jeanette Neishwa was the chosen person. Her confirmation was supposed to be today in front of the Senate. Like, and I can't imagine the work up to that, the financials, the questions you get ahead from the committee, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, you have to basically stop working in the lead up to a confirmation in terms of clients. And, you know, she was on Fox News, I think, as a contributor. Like, you cut all that off. So, like, and here you are at the 11th hour, they yank her nomination, they put in Casey Means. So I've sort of there's a little parlor intrigue. I can't help but wonder, like, what the heck really happened? But then secondly, Laura Loomer is on a tear trying to say she's no good. And I'm intrigued because I think of Casey Means. She's the author of the book Good Energy. She's very Maha. Her brother Callie is a special government employee serving at HHS and advising Bobby Kennedy. Like, I just, to me, like, there was a lot of questions I know from people on Twitter on the Maha MAGA world that, especially when it came to COVID, questioned Jeanette's credentials. And so was this just, do you think a case of we got a better candidate? Or I'm intrigued by this more from a parlor intrigue kind of thing. Do you guys at the Daily Signal, are you digging into this? Is there any thing that you guys know of why this happened?
I have been digging into this. It's certainly an interesting matter. It's very similar to what happened to Dave Weldon at CDC. His nomination was pulled.
Oh, that's such a great correlation. I didn't even think of that.
Yes, his nomination was pulled right before his hearing as well. I think even closer than what we're seeing with Dr. Janet Nashawat. So I think this is a really interesting situation, but I think it was a really good call by the Trump administration because she was drawing a lot of attention for her credentials. She inflated her resume, said that she went to a better medical school than she actually attended.
So I
But
read
think-
that, Elizabeth. I'm glad you read that. I read that online. Like, can you explain that? Like, I saw Laura Loomer and others question her medical credentials. Did she? I mean, how do you? I don't know. I know people do this, but like, how do you honestly think that wouldn't come up in a confirmation hearing? Hey, I went to Harvard. Actually, it wasn't Harvard. It was Harvard. Did she? Was there really something there?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's pretty hard to hide something like that. So she went to two different medical schools, but one of them was a Caribbean medical school, and she downplayed that she went to the American University in St. Martin, and in some cases just said she went to American University, which the one in DC actually does not have a medical school. But I think,
by the way, I spent a semester there, so I know that.
exactly, you're right. And I think that the credentials, however, I think is just the tip of the iceberg on why it was necessary to replace her. Her views were not in line with that of the Secretary of Health or even the president. For instance, she once called the COVID vaccine a gift from God, which I think does not echo the sentiments of RFK Jr. She also once made statements that parents should support their child no matter what gender they are, which of course is very different from the message we've been hearing from the Trump administration of, males are males, females are females. You can't go back and forth. So I think in a lot of ways, she wasn't a fully aligned candidate. Another interesting point is she is Mike Waltz's sister-in-law.
That's where I was going. And Sara Gonzales, to that point, I thought I brought that up in the morning meeting this morning. Jeanette is Mike Walz's sister-in-law. And I thought to myself, when he went, I know Mark told me this morning he got promoted to New York, but let's just say when Mike Walz left the White House, did that doom his sister-in-law?
I mean, you would imagine that that probably was part of it because the timing doesn't make sense any other way. I mean,
Right.
As you pointed out, Sean, the timing doesn't make sense that they would have spent all of this energy, all of this time, all of the financials that are involved in, not appearing anywhere, all of the congressional offices or the Senate offices who did all this digging, came ready for questioning. I mean, if the confirmation hearings were today, they would have already done all of that work. And so everyone knows everything that's been baked into waiting for this moment. The timing just doesn't align any other way. Then there had to be some sort of drama to be a fly on the wall and have heard these conversations. Listen, either way, I'm happy that this doctor was replaced. I never liked the pick. It never made sense to me. It really, really never made sense to me that RFK Jr., who has been so great on the COVID vaccine and the damage that it has done, would have someone like her who has, as Elizabeth pointed out, who has been so pro COVID vaccine. It didn't make sense to me that she would be ultimately reporting to him. This pick does make a little bit more sense. I will say, I just hope that Dr. Means does. She's great on food. She's great on big pharma as far as taking medications that make you sicker rather than keeping your body well. I do hope that she will be as strong as Secretary Kennedy needs her to be on vaccines as well.
Dan, I know, Mark, we spent a lot of time in the morning meeting talking about this, and Mark really was pointing to Laura Loomer. But I agree with Sara Gonzales on this and Elizabeth. Like, she was chosen. I mean, let's be honest. She was on Fox News. She was a contributor. But I think largely Mike Waltz, clearly, he was named early as National Security Advisor. I saw Jeanette. I saw Mike down in Mar-a-Lago during the transition. So I know that she was there. I mean, like, my point in saying all this is that I think that Mike Waltz had a lot to do with her getting picked, if not almost entirely getting picked in the first place. And so when Mike Waltz went, she went. I don't think that that's tough. And especially at a point when there were some issues about credentials coming up, whether they were true or not, I think the answer was, okay, well, she was Mike Waltz's person anyway. I mean, when a chief of staff gets replaced, I know it's not the same at the White House. They take the deputies with them and the new chief of staff. I mean, so to me, this was sort of like in my mind, a package deal. Waltz leaves, she's going too. She just unfortunately hadn't, if this had been a day or two later, maybe she would have had her confirmation hearing if it would have been on cruise control. But I think the idea was, hey, there's a little bit of turbulence here with her nomination. Waltz is gone, so we don't really need her anymore. And, oh, by the way, Callie Means happens to be at HHS telling us that his sister happens to be available and ready to go. So, the timing actually, I think, is more of what's here than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, look, in all seriousness, that makes a lot more sense than just one Laura Loomer tweet kind of sent
Right.
all of this in motion, because it was about a week ago that you had the Mike Wallace stuff. It takes some time to find the replacement, tee this all up. And, certainly Mike Wallace appears to have angered quite a few people, very senior in the White House, with his behavior. And so it would not be a surprise, as you say, to, relatives would be escorted out of the building as well, so to speak. So, I mean, look, for Trump, it's always been that whenever there's personnel chaos, it's not just Trump, any president, it's not a good headline, right? So he's done a good job this second time around of not having as many of these. And so the fact that, there was this turmoil with Mike Wallace, that makes, a lot more sense. As a Democrat, obviously, we love whenever there's a little bit of a family feud. But, it looks like this may pass here, by the end of the day.
All right, I want to switch. One of the things that I'm going to be fascinated by over the next little while is I think there's a lot happening today. We got this UK trade deal announcement, some other things. And I brought this up last week or the week before, whatever it was, when we had the 100-day, is that sometimes when you're going as fast as you do in Trump world, you don't let stuff marinate the way that it probably should. And today, I think, is an interesting example, and we'll see how this thing plays out, because I'm convinced that if the conclave chooses the next pontiff, that's going to take all the spotlight away for like 72 hours. But there's a big thing happening today, and I want to play you a clip. Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, is going to announce today this big air traffic control reform. I want to play you a clip of him, because this is the big thing today. I think this is another example of doing big things that help the country move forward. Take a look.
But just because it's challenging doesn't mean that we don't do it. Prior administrations said it's too complicated, we're not going to do it. That is not this administration. It's going to be a lift. We are going to bring in the best companies in America to help us with this project, and they're excited to be part of this great American build-up. By the way, this is the greatest build, the greatest project that the FAA has undertaken in its existence, what we're going to do in the next 3 or 4 years.
So, Elizabeth, here's the thing. I was in the first Trump administration. We tried they call it ATC, air traffic control reform. When I was there, Bill Schuster was the congressman from Pennsylvania, the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. We had an event in the East Room of the White House. The problem was Congress wasn't on board. It costs a lot of money. And unfortunately, we've had to see the consequences of not reforming this. The system that we use to fly right now is unbelievably antiquated. I mean, like unbelievable, like floppy disk. And most people would have to Google what a floppy disk is. But this is like, I think this is big. This is bold. We've seen, unfortunately, what happens if we don't address America's challenges. And I think that, like, over and over again, the administration, not just at the top, but among the cabinet secretaries, is taking on big, bold things. And this is a big, bold thing that is going to really impact how we live our lives.
Absolutely. So far, in the first 100 days, Secretary Duffy has cut $9.5 billion in waste, but he absolutely is not cutting from the air traffic control budget. He said that the Government Accountability Office presented a report to former President Biden and to former Department of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, saying that the air traffic control systems desperately needed to be modernized, and they ignored it, according to Duffy. And I think it's really gives a lot of hope to travelers all across America that the time of ignoring the need to modernize these systems has come to an end. This is a huge safety issue. We've seen it come up in Newark, of course, the tragic crash in DC, and it's really great to see that the time for a change has come.
Sarah, Secretary Duffy, as Elizabeth just said, sort of brought the receipts. He called out the previous administration. I want to play you this clip and have you react, because, again, these guys aren't just doing it. They're making sure that they're pointing out who did what and who didn't do what. Take a look.
We've been bringing on and hiring more air traffic controllers, bringing more air traffic controllers into the school. DOJ has had no role in cutting our critical safety mission at DOT. We've expanded that, whether they're pipeline inspectors or rail inspectors, airline inspectors, or actually air traffic controllers. But what Chuck Schumer's talking about is DOJ, which again has no play. But if you want CIG to come in and look at what happened in the Philly TRACON when it moved from New York, they moved it last summer under Pete Buttigieg from New York to Philly. And when they do that investigation, they'll find that Chuck Schumer was actually part of the problem, where they were testing up new equipment to deploy in Philly. And because he kept playing political games, that equipment wasn't tested. You'll also find that before they moved the Tracon to Philly from New York for Newark, that they actually should have built out the infrastructure around Philly, so they don't have to pull that information out of Newark. They didn't do those things correctly, and part of the problem was Chuck Schumer. So I look forward to the IG investigation about what the real problems were that we're experiencing right now, how it goes back to the games that Chuck Schumer was playing as he was a lead senator from New York.
You know, Sarah, the thing that I find interesting is just from a political and messaging standpoint, right? One of the things about Duffy that I find fascinating and I actually applaud is that he's taking big, bold initiatives, but he's also making sure that people understand, hey, you want to get mad at someone for where we are today because I can't just hire an air traffic controller. You don't want some random dude off the metro to be landing your plane. Like, you need people that go through the pipeline of the school that takes, well over a year. And by the way, you can't move the Newark guy to DCA or to Houston or to LAX because they need to know the pattern and the flight paths of that particular tower and that airport. And I don't, some people might say it's finger pointing. I think he's making sure that people understand I can't fix this overnight, and here's why.
Yes, especially when you have a mainstream media that is chomping at the bit to blame the Trump administration for everything that Joe Biden broke. That administration broke every single aspect of government. I mean, you're looking at it goes so much further than Chuck Schumer playing political games. You are looking at an administration that the air traffic controller test, there's a lawsuit going on right now in the courts because they were testing to try to eliminate more white male candidates so that they could move more DEI into the air traffic control employees. So they were not even prioritizing American safety. They were prioritizing their DEI initiatives. I mean, this is a lawsuit that is currently going on. So the rot goes so much further than that. But with the Biden administration, what didn't they break? So I applaud Secretary Duffy for making sure to explain to the American people, just like Kristen Welker will try to hit President Trump on the economy, just like all of these mainstream media outlets are so quick to try to say, you saw them doing it like week 2. They were like, but how come you haven't fixed the economy yet, President Trump? These things take time. You guys spent 4 years breaking every single aspect of the federal government. It's going to take a little bit more than 100 days to fix it. And I'm just so thrilled that Secretary Duffy is looking into this and is handling it, because I got to tell you, as a mom, I was already kind of scared to fly. I had anxiety. I'm terrified to fly these days because of how much they broke. So I'm very hopeful. This is just another aspect of President Trump fixing what they broke.
Dan, I think the one superstar, that's not the right word. The one guy who was always out there talking to the cameras in the Biden administration was Pete Buttigieg. He was their guy that they sent everywhere. He's probably, in all honesty, he's probably the only cabinet official that I can think of that did significant media interviews. And he finds himself now on the heels of defending stuff that Duffy and others are saying, hey, Buttigieg, he didn't do anything. But I want to play you a quick clip of him kind of defending himself a little. Take a look.
And the fact that it is so hard to build and do things in this country. And I lived this when I was at the Department of Transportation. We got 20,000 infrastructure projects done, but we could have done more if it were easier to complete the things that we start in this country. And we could have done it more efficiently with our dollar. There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Now, I get Pete's trying to look like a big boy because he grew a beard. And, he wants to run for, I literally was like, dude, the only thing Pete Buttigieg has built is a beard. And you got $42 billion for broadband. They didn't connect a single person to the internet. But this goes back to focus. And I know that some folks on the left don't like to hear this, but part of the problem is they talked about DEI and existential threats to like climate change and all this stuff, Green New Deals, EV chargers. But the bottom line is, you look at the Infrastructure Inflation Act or whatever the heck it called, because it wasn't any of the above. But there's nothing to point to that says we got this done.
Yeah.
The infrastructure projects were a joke. We wasted a ton of money on electric vehicles that we have no chargers to show for it. And then on the transportation front, the bottom line is that it is broken and it is systemic. And the bottom line is Pete Buttigieg can't say he did a single thing for 4 years, except he talks about how it's hard. I'm like, for a guy who wants to have a political future, whether he's running for governor or senator or president even, to me, this is, he doesn't seem to be able to, his only excuse is it's really hard to build things.
I mean, look, I think the challenge, and Mayor Pete is personifying it here on this subject, is so much of what the Biden administration talked about was it's really hard, kind of woe is us, right? The border is hard, it's complicated, we weren't able to do it. The economy is hard, it's complicated. You know, Biden got a few big things done in terms of passing legislation, but the enactment, the execution of so much of this was so poor that now a lot of it is being either stopped, undone, canceled for what is coming down the pike. And I think nothing says failed leadership like, you know, it was too hard. Trump, to his credit, is constantly saying, no, we can do this. Like, I got it, right? Oh, we're going to win. We're going to do this. And whether he does or not, it creates a sense of optimism, can do, which is much more in the kind of American spirit of how to tackle things. And so, look, if they're able to reform the air traffic control, like, bravo, just as an American, as Sarah said, like, people will be happy. And you just never want to be saying, again, like, it was too hard.
I know. Well, I want to call this next segment, You Don't Know Me. Because speaking of getting things done, I think one of the things that everybody, regardless of whether you like Trump or not, or no matter where you are, is that you got to admit he's done amazing things on the border. And another cabinet secretary, Elizabeth, that's going out and doing things, again, call it what you will, but she took the fight right to Illinois. J.B. Pritzker, another potential Democratic nominee or candidate for president 2028, the Illinois governor, has made it clear that Illinois is a sanctuary city. Kristi Noem did a press conference with ICE in front of his house, the governor's mansion in Illinois, and basically said, hey, we're coming for you. We're going to do this. Pritzker's out there talking about, you know, whether we're going to work for you or not. I think, to me, this is another example of where the Trump administration visually is making sure the American people understand, hey, we got you. We're following through on this.
There's been a lot of very outward defiance to the Trump administration's plans to secure the border. Of course, we have J.B. Pritzker, like you said, wanting Illinois to be a sanctuary state. We had a judge in, I think, Boston who was trying to help an illegal immigrant get out the back door. Of course, there's other leaders who have said they would even hide illegal immigrants in their own homes. And so we've seen a lot of defiance here. And I think that what the Trump administration, like you said, has been really strong on is showing that this will not be accepted. We will come to your house, and if you hide illegal immigrants, if you are an illegal immigrant and you try to stay in this country, if you cross the border illegally, you will be deported and there will be consequences. And that's a really strong message that I think every American really has received, whether they like it or not.
Sarah, to that point that Elizabeth's making, I want to show you this. I'm sitting there getting ready yesterday morning because, you know, I flip around all the stations. I read everything because I got to have my A game on for the morning meeting in case Dan comes after me. And I'm watching the local NBC affiliate here. And I want to show you, because this gets back to exactly what Elizabeth's saying. And I see her grinning. I don't know if this is because she actually saw this too. But they're talking about how immigrants are really worried in the greater D.C. area. So take a listen to what they had to say.
Millie's owner says agents asked to see I-9 forms.
It's very concerning. The employees are very scared. We're worried about some of them not coming back to work. And just a general panic amongst the people that it affects.
The workers are upset. And the lead into the other piece, that was the Fox segment, but the NBC piece said immigrants are worried, right? And I was like, wait. So if you're an immigrant, I'm all of us to some degree are immigrants. I'm not worried. You're not worried. They keep gaslighting us. Like, they're not worried. Employees aren't worried. It's illegal immigrants, illegal aliens that are worried. And they don't want to talk about that. And you listen to the owner of that restaurant, Sara Gonzales, and he's like, they're worried. Well, why would they be worried if you didn't have anything that to me, that's like the kid at the, when the parents come in and they're like, anything going on? They're like, nope, nothing. Don't look in the closet though. Just don't look in the closet. Like, I'm like, dude, you basically are admitting that you hired illegals, because if you had nothing to worry about, you'd say, hey, they came in, I showed them everyone's I-9 or work forms or licenses or whatever I need you. And they left. And I asked them if they wanted some takeout. Like, that guy, basically the tell was, I hire illegals and I didn't like them coming.
Yeah, I hope ICE was watching that broadcast so they know where to go next. I mean, my response to this man, I know he was trying to evoke, some sort of sympathy for these people. My response is good. They should be worried. They should be scared. There's a new sheriff in town. And to your point about Kristi Noem, I think that all of these picks, all of these cabinet picks, these higher level picks have just been incredible by President Trump. He has really done a great job of picking people who will reflect his tone, who will reflect his demeanor, and who is ready to implement his agenda. And, far cry from the first administration, which, let's be real, Sean, you were the best pick of the first administration. Okay. So I just want to be clear. I'm not directing this towards you, but we did see him get it wrong a couple times in that first administration. Whatever he missed that first time, his eyes are really clear this second time around. All of these people borders are Tom Homan. You've got all of these people, I call them the Avengers. You've got all of these people, the American Avengers, just ready to implement President Trump's agenda. And honestly, it should be very easy. When you look at the polls, you see that Americans voted overwhelmingly for law and order on every front, right? Not just the illegals, but all of the violence that's happening in cities. Americans said, we're tired of it. We want law and order. And so they know that they have the backing of the American people to just go out and get the job done. And good on them.
Dan, let me ask you this from a Democratic perspective. If the House leadership calls you or a candidate for running for president says, hey, Dan Turrentine, I love the advice you give on the morning meeting every day. How should I position myself when it comes to illegal immigration, right? Should I be tough on it? Because I looked at that clip and I have the same reaction that Sara Gonzales does, where I'm like, dude, you're hiding people, you're breaking the law. And the last election shows that most voters don't have a ton of sympathy for this. So if you're saying to a Democrat, where's the line between, knowing that you need these voters, but also looking like you're upholding the law?
Yeah, I think that I would start with just a basic common sense test. I mean, Sarah said it's like 80-20, 90-10 on a lot of this stuff about if people are here illegally, if they have a criminal record, like I would start there. You should absolutely support to deport them. Like just basic common sense, they should go out of the country. I think the line for the Trump administration in all of this is, one, make sure you don't get people who are U.S. citizens, right? And there are going to be mix-ups when you have the volume of people that they're trying to address. I think the second side is when communities get dramatically disrupted. So if you have a major industry in a town and a significant number of the employees are, let's say, illegal immigrants that have been here for 20 or 15 years, so you don't really feel like they're new to your community, that's where I think there may, it's kind of the mark on the horizon that people are going to be curious about. How does the public feel about that? But I think you have to just start with the premise that anyone who comes here illegally needs to be dealt with, right? It is a problem. You can't just allow them to come in, because we saw what happened in the first 2 years of the Biden administration. It just got out of control. And, Democrat or Republican, 90% of Americans said enough.
Yeah, I agree. Elizabeth Mitchell, I want to turn to this weekend because I am a believer. Dan knows this from my comments every morning, but I think that everybody freaked out about how Trump handled tariffs and whatever, and they just needed to take as the kids call it, take a beat and just calm down. Like, you don't solve big problems. It's kind of like what Sean Duffy was saying with air traffic control. We've been getting ripped off for decades. You don't just suddenly say, hey guys, game's over. Can you guys just take your tariffs down and your non-tariff bearers? And they go, yeah, sorry, we were just waiting for you to call. Like, somebody would have done that. So there's this big meeting in Geneva this weekend. Scott Bessent, Jameson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, are meeting with their Chinese counterparts. And China looks like they're ready to deal. I think that my point in all this is that any progress is good progress. Like, if I give you $1, that's $1 more than you had. And everybody's trying to put this yardstick out and say, he needs to achieve the following. And it's like, time out. We've been getting screwed. And now you want to judge how much progress is good enough. My view is any progress is better than the bad that we had before. But what are you looking for this weekend as a sign that things are moving forward?
Of course, the president has kept the state of deals pretty close to his chest, not wanting to risk losing a deal or letting too much out. So not completely sure what we're going to see this weekend, but I do know that, of course, we saw the UK trade deal was announced today, being a great deal for the United States, ending that ripping off that the president has talked so much about. But he also said that we can expect more deals coming up. And of course, a deal with China would be, I think, about the biggest one we can expect, because so many exports are coming from China. This would really be huge for both countries. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what we get this weekend for sure.
Sarah, he got asked yesterday, what do you expect are you going to take the tariffs down? I love the response that he gave here, because normally he goes into a riff or the weave or whatever else. But check out this response yesterday when he got asked, are you willing to pull your tariffs back?
Are you open to pulling back your tariffs in order to get China to the negotiating table?
No. No. I mean, it's so un-Trump. Normally he'd be like, look, this is what we're going to do. And it was like, I love the fact that all these guys were about to meet with someone, right? He's about to go into a negotiation. And they're like, will you do the following? No. Will you take the tariffs down on these other goods? No. Why would you do that ahead of the meeting? Like, to me, these are some of the dumbest questions I've ever heard. I don't care if you're going for a job interview or dealing with the Chinese. You don't telegraph what you're willing to give in on before the actual meeting.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, of course not. But again, Sean, you're dealing with a media who doesn't want to ask the right questions insofar as what is best for this country. You're dealing with a media who just wants to make President Trump look bad. So they don't care that President Trump could be, giving away some of his secrets, some of his negotiation power, standing there at the podium. They probably would prefer that happened, because they don't want him to be successful in this, which is why they are not willing, as you pointed out, they're not willing to just take a beat, take a breath, let him play it out. There's been decades of them screwing us, China screwing us, and all of this trade imbalance. It's going to, as with the Department of Transportation and the air traffic controllers, it's going to take a minute to allow this to happen. And so you've already seen not just China, but all of these countries start coming to the table rather quickly. I mean, quicker than I anticipated that they would at least start these talks. So I'm looking forward to it. I fully trust President Trump. This is an issue, Sean, that I told you last time I was on the show. I'm just a mom from Texas. Okay. So this is not an issue. Well, this is not an issue that I really thought much about, honestly, until President Trump started sounding the alarm. And then when someone like I was, who I just didn't think about it, it didn't affect my life. Well, it does, but I didn't think that it did. And so when he starts sounding the alarm about it and you start looking into this and you're like, oh, this is bad. And every prior administration has just let this get worse. If there is anyone who is strong enough at negotiating, it's probably the guy who wrote The Art of the Deal. So I'm going to go ahead and sit back and trust that he knows what he's doing and just let it play out.
I think if he gets a deal, a lot of people are going to eat a lot of crow. And then hopefully that's tariff free. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.